Greetings, students. Welcome back to Esterbrook University. We have here the Esterbrook Model J pen, and that will be the subject for this week. So this is probably the single most popular / famous pen that Esterbrook made. So let's just go through it right now. The big difference between the J and the transition pen is it has what they call a double jewel pen. There's the jewel on both ends of the pen. In the Model J pen, the jewel on the end of the pen is noticeably smaller than the jewel on the end of the cap. They are not the same size. There are other variants of the J, which we'll get to in subsequent videos, called the LJ and the SJ, which have slight size differences than the Model J, where that the jewels are in fact actually the same size. But one way of distinguishing a true Model J pen as opposed to the variants, one of the easiest ways is if the jewels are of disproportionate size like this, you know you have a Model J. This in many ways is just like all the other Esterbrooks that came before it, particularly very similar to the transition pen. It has the fairly substantial stainless steel clip that says Esterbrook on it. It has the nice, fairly wide cap band. All the trim is stainless steel. It is not nickel plated, so you can polish it quite nicely. It has the stainless steel filling lever filler. It's probably worth explaining how a lever filling mechanism actually works for those of you who are maybe only familiar with very modern pens. So this is actually what's going on inside a lever filler. So here's a section with the rubber sac attached. So there's a rubber sac in here, and this is what holds the ink. So you can see this is fairly thin and small, does not hold a lot of ink. What's on the, and this would be sitting inside the barrel here like that. Also sitting inside the barrel would be this thing, which is called a J-bar. This is a somewhat flexible, springy piece of metal, and it would be sort of stuck down here with this J end kind of jammed into the end. And what happens is when you pull this lever here, the lever is actually pushing down on the J-bar. The J-bar is what's providing the springiness. So as it pushes down on the J-bar, the J-bar is squeezing against the sac in the inside of the barrel. So what happens is you compresses the sac. When you release the lever, it releases the pressure and allows the sac to expand. So effectively the sac compresses, the air gets expelled, the sac the pressure is released. It allows the sac to expand and then draw up ink. And you usually have to do this a couple of times to get a decent fill. And this is pretty much all the ink that you're going to get in the pen. And you know, this is obviously not going to fill absolutely 100%, but in any case, not a massive amount of ink going on inside these lever filler pens. I'm going to do a subsequent video on restoring these pens, so we're going to go into a lot more detail in a later video on how this works exactly, but I thought it would be worthwhile kind of explaining a little bit what's going on inside a lever filler. The cap on the Model J takes 1.5 turns to open. It posts, obviously. Pretty light pen, only weighs 14 grams, and it's because it's mostly sort of a plastic material, very little metal, etc. This particular one has the Model 1551 nib. The 1551 nib was described by Esterbrook as a firm medium school nib. We'll see how this writes in a moment. And of course, like all Esterbrook pens, it features the interchangeable, removable Esterbrook screw-in nib system. This is a fairly typical size pen for its era. However, by modern standards, it's actually fairly small pen, decently smaller than the Lamy Safari or the Pilot Metropolitan, as you can see here. And again, as I said, only weighs 14 grams, a pretty light pen. Like most Esterbrook pens of this period, it came in a sort of a standard set of 6 colors. So we have a gray, a red, a green, a brown, a blue, and a black. Now, what's interesting is these are sort of the official sort of catalog colors, if you will, from Esterbrook, but there are clear variants. So in other words, if you take the green pen, for example, there were definitely varying shades of green that, depending on how you collect these, you may want to say, oh, I want all the different shades of green. There are also various different shades of brown. This is a more copper colored brown. I believe Esterbrook actually called the color copper. And here's one that is more of a sort of root beer brown color. There was also variance in the gray. There's sort of a lighter gray and a darker gray color as well. So although the sort of 6 sort of standard colors, if you start collecting these, depending upon how you want to structure your collection, you may end up with quite a few more than you bargained for. If you really want to get every color, every variant, etc., there's almost an infinite number of possibilities. But so, like I said, a lot of nice colors available here. And of course, you're clearly wondering how this pen writes. We want to see that. So let's see it right now. Okay, folks, what we're writing with here today is an Esterbrook Model J. And this particular one has a 1551 nib, which is described as firm medium. So this is a very smooth nib. Very, very smooth, in fact. And I've said this before, if you don't like the way your Esterbrook nib writes, if it's scratchy, etc., these are some of the easiest nibs around to tune yourself, and I will definitely be covering that in a subsequent video, how you can actually go about doing that, because it's actually quite simple to do, and the Esterbrook nibs are readily replaced if you mess it up. If you're using a vintage nib that's not an old stock vintage nib, how they actually write in terms of fine, medium, broad, etc., is sometimes not really accurate because they've been worn down quite a bit, etc. The more inexpensive nibs like this one do not have tipping material, etc. So you're sort of at the mercy of the wear and tear that's happened over the years. If you have a new old stock nib, which are readily available even at this decades and decades later, then that's a different story. So that is pretty much how nicely this Model J writes. It writes great, and it writes really well. In case you're interested in this ink color, this is Waterman Tender Purple. Now, just as I said it before, when you're using these vintage sack fill pens, you have to be really careful about which ink you use. You want to use a very, very, very safe, gentle ink, etc. And the Waterman inks, the Mont Blanc inks, etc., are ideal for that purpose. I don't have too much more to say about this great Esterbrook Model J pen. This is probably the most popular model Esterbrook around. You should be able to pick up a used one of these in nice, fine, restored condition for $35, $40, $45, maybe $50, unless it's a particularly rare one, etc. So not an expensive pen, and you can get a real cool piece of pen history in the process. So I think that will just about do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe. Please keep those thumbs up coming. And as always, until next time, have a great day. Bye-bye.